and welcome, and Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Kitshanu B'mitzvotav V'tzivanu La'asok B'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Thank you. So we're in Deuteronomy chapter 19. We're starting at verse 6, and we're looking at the cities of refuge and where a manslayer can live and not be threatened by the people who are the blood avengers. They're called the blood avengers. In other words, members of the family, possibly, of the one who got killed, who will try and avenge his blood. So here we go. Pen yirdof goel hadam acharei harotzeach. So lest, the goel hadam, the blood avenger, will pursue acharei harotzeach, after the murderer or manslayer, ki yachem levavo, for his heart is hot. In other words, of course, he's emotionally driven to do this, the blood avenger, vehisigo, and he will catch up to him, he will reach him. Ki yirbeh haderech, because the way is long, meaning the way to one of the cities of refuge. So remember, we discussed yesterday how the cities of refuge were strategically chosen to be equidistant from one another and from the borders of the land, and that there should be signs to point the direction to one of these cities. So if they're not set up in this way, right, there's a possibility that the blood avenger will reach him. Ki vehisigo, and he will reach him. Ki yirbeh haderech, because the way is long. Vehikahu, and he shall smite him nafesh, meaning he will kill him. Velo ein mishpat mavet. And this person, and I believe the person we're talking about, is the manslayer, because we said he had no intention of killing this person. Circumstances were such that an accident happened and he killed him. But he does not have really a sentence of death. Ki lo soneh hu lo mitmo shilshom, and here the Torah gives you the reason, because he never hated him ever before. Mitmol shilshom, from the day or before, from yesterday or the day before. There's no long-standing grievance between these people. He had no motive to do it. Pen yirdof goel hadam, lest the blood avenger pursue him. Lechach ani, and for this reason, ani omer, I say, la'achin lecha haderech, to prepare yourselves the way for arei miklat rabim, and that there should be many cities of refuge. Okay? So right now we're talking about 3, but we know actually that there were others as well later on. Here we go. Al kain anochim etzavcha lemor, and for this reason I command you, saying, Shalosh arim tavdilacha, you shall separate out 3 cities. Let's go on. Ve'im yarchiv Hashem Elokecha et gvulcha, and if the Lord your God should widen your borders, ka'asher nishba la'avotecha, as he swore to your ancestors, v'natan lacha et kol haaretz, and give to you, provide for you, the entire land, asher diber latet la'avotecha, of which he spoke to give your ancestors. And there's a Rashi on this. Ve'im yarchiv, ve'ka'asher, just as Nishba, he swore, latet lacha eretz kini uknizi v'kadmoni, that he swore to give the Kenites, the Kenizzites, and the Kadmonites. So these are not, I think these are not the 7 nations. This is beyond them, I believe. Next. Ki tishmor ekol hamitzvah hazot, right? If you observe this entire commandment, la'asota, to perform it, asher anochi mitzavcha hayom, as I command you today, la'ahava, to love et Adonai Elohecha, to love the Lord your God, v'la'alechet bidrachav kol hayamim, and to walk in his paths all the days. Yasafta lacha, you shall add for yourselves, od shalosh arim, another 3 cities. Al hashalosh ha'ele, on these 3. So as I mentioned, there were more than just 3. V'yasafta lacha od shalosh, you shall add for yourselves another 3. So here we go. Look at what he actually winds up with by saying, Hare Tesha. There are actually 9 cities of refuge. Shalosh shebe'ever hayarden, 3 on the other side of the Jordan, v'shalosh shebe'eretz Canaan, and 3 in the land of Canaan, v'shalosh la'atid lavo, and 3 cities at some future time. So, velo yishafech dam naki, so that innocent blood should not be spilled. Bekerev artzecha, in the midst of your land, asher Hashem Elokecha, which the Lord your God, noten lecha nachala, is giving to you as a possession. V'ha'aya alecha damim, and blood shall be accounted to you. Right? In other words, we're talking, of course, about taking innocent life. But if there should be ish soneh l're'ehu, a man who hates his fellow, v'aravlo, and he lies in wait for him, v'kam alav, and he rises against him, v'hikahu nefesh v'amet, and he kills him, he deals him a mortal blow that he die. V'nas elachat ha'arim ha'ela, and if he flees to one of these cities. Rashi. V'chi ye'ish soneh l're'ehu, and if there is a man who hates his fellow, al yedei sinato, through his hatred, uba lidei, he comes to, I think this is, yes, through his hating this person, he comes to lie in wait for him, va'arevlo, right? Let's see and make sure that I'm reading this correctly. Mikan amru, and from this they said, avar adam al mitzvah kala. So it could be that, I think he says, let's say, see, because it could be huba liyadi va'erevlo. So it could be that he's saying, if he comes to me, I will lie in wait for him. Could be that it's what this is saying. So at any rate, from this they derived that if a person transgresses a mitzvah kala, on a simple mitzvah, so for lavor a mitzvah chamura, in the end he will transgress a serious mitzvah. The fish avar alo tisna, and because he transgressed the commandment of do not hate, which is in Leviticus 19, so for lavo lidei shvichut damim, in the end he will come to shed blood. L'chaf ne'emar, and for this reason it says, ki yeh ish soneh l're'ehu. That's why it goes to say that if there is a person who hates his fellow, the gomer, etc. Shehayalo lichtov, because he could have just said, v'chi yakum ish v'arav l're'ehu. It could have simply said, left out that preliminary phrase and said, and if a person rises up against another person or his fellow and lies in wait for him, the hikau nefesh and deals him a deadly blow. Could have just said that. So why does it say this little piece in front to teach us that you want to be careful about relatively simple mitzvot that are not complicated to do? So that mitzvah of not hating a person. Interesting, because we look at the hatred that is spewed around these days, and that is actually taught, that people are taught to hate, etc., and how this goes against the Torah itself. So here we go. So here's a person who actually has committed murder. Veshalchu ziknei iro, right? And the elders of his town shall send velakhu oto misham, and take him from that place, from that city of refuge. Venatnu oto biyad goel hadam vamet, and they shall place him in the control or in the hands of the blood avenger, so that he die. Now, this is speaking in very, very broad terms, and in very very much as headlines, because obviously they don't simply do that. And we know that it would require a trial, right? But the real point that the Torah is trying to make here is that the city of refuge doesn't work for someone who commits intentional murder. That's the point that the Torah is trying to make. And I think the reason why it talks about placing him in the control of the blood avenger is that in the course of when the trial is over, and if the person is found guilty and is actually to be sentenced, it says that the people who witnessed should go first. And so I think that's part of what's going on here. As I'm meditating on this, right, I think the idea is that at some point, this person is going to have to pay the price for having committed murder. And I know that it goes against our sensitivities these days for the most part. We don't believe in blood for blood. That is where most of us are at these days. And the truth of the matter is that we know of cases where people were executed and subsequently found to be innocent. And that is just a terrible, terrible thing. And so to be on the safe side, we want to prevent doing that. I can tell you that in the course of the practice of Torah law, there also was every attempt made to make sure that the person was innocent and not in fact guilty. But there were many different situations that made that possible. Lo tachos, so it says, you shall not take pity. Lo tachos einech alav, you shouldn't. So I think basically what it's saying is, you shouldn't turn your eyes away. You shouldn't ignore this regarding this person. Uviata adam anakim Israel, and you shall remove innocent blood from Israel, v'tovlach, and it'll be good for you. So in other words, if you make sure that people who are innocent don't die, and people who are guilty are in fact punished, this will be a good thing. So let's take a look at Rashi on this. Lo tachos einecha, right? You shall not turn your eyes away, essentially, alav, on this person. And this is from the Sifrei. Shelo tomru, that you shouldn't say. This is interesting because in a way, this is part of the argument. Harishon kvar neherag, since the first person is already killed, he's already dead. Lama anu horgim etzeh. Why should we now have to kill another person? This person who committed the murder. V'nimtzeu shnei Yisraelim harugim, so that now 2 Jews have been killed. So in some ways, I think that is an argument that may be used nowadays as well, and to avoid capital punishment. So it's difficult. These are very painful subjects and part of the painful elements of reality as to how to deal with these particular situations. Going on. Lo tasig gvul re'echa, you shall not remove the boundary of your neighbor, of your fellow, asher gavlu rishonim, which the early ones set. Gvul is, of course, a border, right? Set up as a border, a boundary. Benachalacha, in your portion, in your heritage, asher tinchal, which you will inherit. Ba'aretz, in the land, asher Hashem Elokecha, which the Lord your God, noten lecha l'rishta, is giving you as an inheritance. So let's take a look. So Rashi here, lo tasig gvul, right? You should not remove a boundary, right, or cross a boundary, something like that. And this is lashon. This is an expression that we find in Isaiah chapter 42. Nasugu achor, right? We shall draw back. Shemachazir siman chalukat akarka, that he is pulling back the indication of the boundary. In other words, how the land is being divided. La'achor, backwards. Letoch sadeh chaveiro, into his neighbor's field. So he's extending the boundary marker into his neighbor's field. He's reducing his neighbor's property. Leman harchiv et shalo, in order to broaden his or to widen his own property. V'halo kvar ne'emar, but he says it's already stated, lo tigzol, you should not steal, right? Ma Talmud lomar, right? So why is Scripture now saying, since we already know you're not supposed to steal, and this person is stealing someone else's land essentially, right? So why does Scripture say lo tasig, right? So why does Scripture teach you about this particular law in this particular way? Limed al ha'oker tchum chaveiro. He teaches that someone who digs up the area of his neighbor, she'over bishlei lavim. In other words, that when he actually removes the boundary of his neighbor, he actually is transgressing two negative commandments, shlei lavim, right? Yachol af bechutz ha'aretz. This is stated, of course, in reference to the land of Israel. Or maybe this also applies in the outside the land of Israel. Talmud Lomar, and for this reason, Scripture states, "V'nachalatcha asher tinchal," when in the inheritance or the portion which you will inherit, etc. Be'aretz Yisrael arveh b'shnei lavim. So we find out that in the land of Israel, he transgresses two negative commandments. B'chutz la'aretz, however, outside the land of Israel, eino over ela mishum lo tigzol. But outside the land of Israel, he now is guilty of one transgression, and that is, you shall not steal. So doing this in the land of Israel is of double significance than doing it outside the land of Israel. That's not to say that it's permissible in any sense, right? It's just that there's a greater sense of injustice in the land of Israel itself, because that is our heritage, and it's our neighbor's heritage as well. So I think, again, this is something possibly to meditate on. Lo yakum eid echad, one witness should not arise, the ish against a man, the chol avon against any iniquity, ulechol chatat, and to any, so avon would be an intentional sin, chatat would be an unintentional sin, the chol chet asher yichta, regarding any sin which he commits, al pi shnei edem, but at the mouth of two witnesses, or al pi shlosha edim, or at the mouth of three witnesses, yakum hadavar, is the matter established. In other words, in terms of trying to determine the truth regarding a case. So let's take a look here. Okay. Eid echad, one witness. And this is found in Sota, page 2. Ze bana'av, right? So he says that this is a binyan av, is a type of logical statement where they may give you one situation, but you're to draw a general conclusion from this, right? So he's going to tell you, Kol Eid Sheba Torah, that any time, in other words, it mentions a witness in the Torah, Shnayim, they actually require two witnesses. Ela im kain parat lacha bo echad, unless the Torah specifically says in that case that one witness is sufficient. If the Torah just mentions aid, if it just mentions witness, but doesn't specify that it's one witness by saying aid echad, right, we're to understand that it means two witnesses anywhere else in the Torah. L'chol avon, against any, well, I'm translated avon as a intentional transgression, ulachol chatat, and again as an unintentional, liyot chaveiro ne'enash al edoto, that is so that his fellow is punished as a consequence of his witness, his testimony, lo onesh guf, velo onesh mamon, right? He says neither a physical punishment, a corporeal punishment, or a fine, lo onosh mamon. Aval kamhu lishvu'ah. But in fact, he says this. I think what he's saying is that a one witness may arise regarding an oath he has taken, right? Amar, in other words, to question an oath, whether this person made that oath or fulfilled that oath. Amar l'chaveiro. So here we go. Here's what he gives an example. If he said to his fellow, "Ten li mama, give me a mana, shehilviticha." In other words, please give me back the mana that I loaned to you. Amar lo ein lecha biyadiklo. So his fellow says, I don't have anything. You never lent me anything. The eid echad meido, and then one witness makes testifies sheyesh lo, right? That in fact that this second person did in fact borrow that money and is holding on to it. Chayav lihishavalo. So what this is saying is that it's going to make that second person required to take an oath. Right? So, in other words, just one witness who claims that second person, in fact, did borrow the money and has not returned it, now forces that second witness to take an oath that he, in fact, returned the money. And in that case, one witness is sufficient. That's the point that's being made here. Al pi shnei edim, regarding two witnesses, right, at the testimony of two witnesses, and this is in the tractate Gittin, page 71. Velo sheyichtavu edotam ba'egeret, and in other words, because it says al pi at the mouth of two witnesses, it has to be personal, and they cannot. It means they are not going to be able to write down their testimony in a note, v'yishlachu leveitin, and send that note to the Beit Din. V'lo she'yamod turgaman bein ha'edim. Not only that, it means because it's got to be at his mouth, they cannot take an interpreter between the witnesses, uvein hadayanim, and the judges. So the judges would have to know the language of the witnesses so that they hear them directly. Again, think to yourselves, in what sense is this trying to make sure that the testimony is as reliable as possible? And that's where we're going to stop today. Lots to be said here in Torah Tmima. Okay, here we go. And we're going to talk about a scheming witness. Let's see, there we go. All right. Any thoughts while I'm...
How do you know that a witness is a false witness?
Well, they're going to talk about a false witness in a moment, okay? But what it's saying is because they're two witnesses, you're now in a position because you don't have them witnessing together. They come in separately, and if there's a if the testimony isn't consistent, then you can start to question how valid the testimony is. The assumption is that if that they're telling the truth, and they're now you examine them separately. They can't be in the same room. They can't be listening to each other. And if the testimony is consistent, that is in fact the truth. That's, I think, the assumption. And the lawyers will do, in this case, the court will do everything they can to see if there's some way in which they are not being consistent, to examine them carefully and make sure that their testimony is consistent. That's essentially how that's done. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording here.